Okay, good morning. In
Good morning.
Hemshech, Tafresh Tzaddik Dalet, on page 118, and which corresponds with and is based on Ayin Beis, volume 2, pages 1155 through 1157. And we've been discussing Ayin, which is a state of Ayin, of bittul, selflessness, and that is its role, as we've discussed at length. That God, the built-in Metzias Nimtza, emanated a Metzias Nimtza that you find in existential terms, an existence like ours. We now have the concept of bittul, of selflessness, which of course is going to be a vital component, because everything that is going to exist in creation all come through the Oyer. Oyer, that field of energy, is where everything takes place. As a result, essentially you can say that it's through the lens and through the channel and the instrument of Oyer that creation, including the Yesh, will come to be. That means that bittul, even though the Yesh fundamentally is not a state of bittul, it's a state of richuk and shalei be'erech from atzmos, from godliness. It's actually created precisely to be not like godliness, but yet it comes through godliness, and through a godliness that manifests in existential terms, meaning in the same level that our existence exists. So it's not a leap from built Metzias Nimtza, from atzmos to existence as we know it, that to the yesh, that it goes through the channel of bittul. In this case, heder tfisas makim, that the air senses, because the source is sensed in the air, it therefore has that element of feeling no self-value, because in the presence of the source from which it emanates. So now we have in the existence as we know it. We don't know it yet because it's all before the tzimtzum and so on, or even after the tzimtzum, the ayin, the higher level of ayin, but it's very high levels, that in the process that will ultimately become existence as we know it, we have the principle of bittul, of ayin. And that ayin will serve the key element of giving us the tools to be able to sense God, godliness, and ultimately connect with godliness. And that's exactly the kavanah, that tachtonim, the yesh, which is devoid of godliness. On its own, it does not feel or sense anything. It will come, tachtonim will become a dira, will become a home for the divine. To make a home for the divine in Atzilus or in Oyer is no achievement. Oyer is already a dira in a way. I won't call it a dira. You can't say Oyer is a home for God, but it's basically a manifestation of godliness. There's nothing else there. The goal is always to achieve it, not in the Holy of Holies, but in the mundane world in which we live, which on its own does not sense the divine. Another aspect, just to make it even more palatable, is that Kedusha, the etzem inyan of Kedusha. What is holiness? Holiness is not atzmos. Atzmos is beyond Kodesh and Chel, Kedesh and Chel. Atzmos is beyond Eir and Cheshech, light and darkness. It's beyond radiating and not radiating. It's beyond everything. The mere fact that there's a concept called Kedusha comes from bittul. What does the Alter Rebbe say in Tanya Perek Vov? Which Perek is it? Yeah, Perek Vov. That Kedusha means everything that's bottled telekus. The opposite of Kedusha is it doesn't have bittul. So something Kedusha, for example, you take animal hide and you turn it into parchment, klaf, and then you have a sefer with the right kavanah, sets and writes the letters, the holy letters, whether it's a sefer Torah or tefillin or mezuzah, stam. He's turned a physical object that began as a yesh into a dover kodesh, a chefza shel kedusha. That this very parchment, this very hide, has now become holy forever. You can never destroy it. You can never throw it out. Even if a sefer Torah is possible, you have to bury it. You have transformed something of this physical world. So this transformation, essentially, you've taken a yesh and you've turned it into oir, into a keli for oir, I should say, for kedusha. Now, if you didn't have Eir Ein Sof and these highest levels that sensed alakus, you wouldn't have the concept of kedusha. You'd have that leap I'm talking about from atzmu yesha miti to yesha nivra. The ayin be'emsa is the key to the transformation of the yesha nivra to be a keli, a container, a channel for godliness, and turn godliness which reflects God. Godliness Eir eliki, it's godly and reflects God atzmus. Now, this does not contradict the fact that Eir itself is as distant from atzmus as the yesh, because atzmus is not Eir either. But Eir in the world of Metzias Nimtza is nothing but godliness, and a yesh does not begin as being godly. A yesh is a product of godliness, of God, a creation of God's, whereas the Eir is a godly emanation. So it's irrelevant here to the concept of what Eir is. It's like saying Kedusha is closer to God than Chayil, not to Atzmus. From Atzmus' point of view, everything is equal. But Atzmus wanted it to be manifest in Giluyim. And in Giluyim, there is absolutely a hierarchy. There's Eser Kedushes, there's 10 levels of holiness. There are things that are holier than other things. There's Kedesh Kedoshim, there's Kedesh. There's Shabbos Shabbosin, there's Chayil. If you talk from Atzmus, you say, what's the difference between Shabbos and Chayil? There's no difference. Atzmus B'chlal, there's no difference between anything. Everything is everything and everything is nothing, as we discussed at length. But that's not what God wanted. He wanted an existence like ours, where there'll be Chayil, weekday, mundane, and he wants the Chayil to be transformed, Chulin Altar HaKodesh, into something that's holy and sacred. That is essentially reflection of Eir. So, to put it in simple terms, the physical world, on its own, the yesh needs to be turned into a keli, a container that is seamlessly containing and reflecting the Eir, which reflects in turn what God's intentions. And that's the whole process in a nutshell. So now, to explain the difference between something could be the existence can be infinitely distant, but it has its manner of expression is not distant. He's using the example of Ratzon in contrast to Seichel. That's what we began learning. So what did we begin learning? The following: that both of them are koiches hanefesh. They both come from the nefesh. One is Er Primi, one is Er Makif. I'm just going over on page 118, where he began with the example. So he says like this: they're both Keiches HaNefesh. Nevertheless, the way they manifest is very different. He calls the Keich HaSeichel is Chutz La'atzmus HaNefesh. Now remember, when you say chutz, he doesn't mean physically outside of the soul, meaning outside the body. It's still a faculty of the soul, but relatively speaking, it's not a reflection of the soul. It's a faculty of the soul. So in that sense, it's chutz. The Ratzon, on the other hand, is an expression of the soul. Like he says, it's the netiyah and hamshacha, the inclination and the drawing of the spirit or the soul to whatever it is that is drawn to. And even though, and this is the last thing we learned, and even though Ratzon is also, the object of your Ratzon and desire is something outside of you. You want to eat a meal. You want to walk. You want to use Seichel. So its object is also outside of the soul. But we're not talking about the object. We're talking about the koyach itself. The koyach, as he says, is a poil. It's a function. What is the function of Ratzon? Not its objective. Its objective can be to get something outside of the nefesh, fine. But the function and the activation or the activity of Ratzon is to express the soul. And the function and activity of Seichel is not to express the soul, it's to understand something. Does the soul want it? Yes. When you want to use your Seichel, there's Ratzon and Seichel there. But the Ratzon is about what the soul wants. And the seichel is the actual thing that it wants, which is to use seichel. So seichel is far more, therefore, in that sense, a defined function. And ratzon is a reflection of the soul, like I used the example of the chief of staff. Doesn't matter. His role is only one thing, is to tell us what the king wants. The heads of each department, the department heads, their function is to run their department. Obviously aligned with the ratzon klali, the ratzon of the nefesh. Obviously the seichel is functioning aligned with what the ratzon wants, but its activity, its involvement is in a specific function, which of course is leading us to understand that oir is like ratzon in this context. But we haven't finished the subject, so let's continue here now. Okay. So here we are. What line are we up to? We're up to, okay. She says that's ratzon. Yeah. She asked the question, isn't ratzon also a davar chutz mimenu? Like we learned about heskim, about the consideration, which is already considering something beyond yourself. God is considering existence. So existence is already something outside, something not reflective of himself. So he said that's heskim im kain ma'u hefesh b'neim. I'm just summing up what I just said inside. What is the difference between seichel and ratzon? If both of them are, even ratzon is also toward something outside of the actual soul. He says, Acha inyan hu di nikeyachu poil. Koyach is a poil. Poil means either function or poil an active, and poil means an active state or something that's activating. So the power of seichel is in the davar hamuskol laskilo la'avine. It's in the seichel. That's what its whole function is. If the seichel would just be reflecting what the soul wants, it wouldn't be doing seichel. It needs to be involved in seichel. It's just like saying that the ratzon wants to open your eyes and see. If the eye is focused only on the ratzon, you have to be focused on the ability to see. On the other hand, koyach haratzon pula say its pula is b'hanefesh. It's not in the object of the desire. That's not the function of ratzon. The object. Its pula is in the nefesh. Liyes neita v'nimshach. That's what ratzon's role is to get the nefesh, which on its own doesn't have a desire right now. And then the desire is essentially an inclination of the nefesh being drawn to a particular thing, to the thing that he wants. So the object, so its role, koyach haratzon, is carrying the nefesh. Koyach haseichel is not carrying the nefesh. It's the idea of conceiving of an idea and understanding an idea. Okay. Now that was step one. Now, in Ayin Beis, and here now the Friedrich Rebbe is going to elaborate a bit more. He's going to go even further now. This is till now we're talking about the etzem hanefesh is here, the koyach haratzon and the koyach haseichel. He's going to go now in deeper. If you remember, I gave a long introduction, which I'm not going to do again. That it doesn't just jump from the nefesh to the koyach. It goes through stages. There's koyachas atzmim. We're going to soon learn about koyach atzmi. The core faculty as it is within the soul, or hiyulia atzmi is going to be the expression he's going to use, that core essential potential. Then there's the koyach hanelam, which means it's already a faculty, but it's not yet revealed. And then there's the koyach goli, the actual revealed faculty. So he's going to explain that seichel and ratzon are not just different in how they express the soul, where the ratzon expresses the soul and the seichel is just a unique faculty. They also are different the way they emerge from the koyach atzmi. So though both of them have a koyach atzmi, which means a fundamental core potential state that is not in any way something you can define as ratzon or even as seichel, but yet there's a difference of how they relate to each other. And ratzon, of course, again relates much more to the core than seichel relates to its core. That's what he's going to be discussing now. Okay, and he says like this. V'chein yuvan And the same is understood, just as we understand now that Ratzon and Seichel function differently. Their function is very different in how they relate to the soul. One is a direct so-called channel from the soul, inclining and being drawn to something, and the other is a specific faculty. He says, "V'chein yuvan ha'hefresh ba'akeches seichel v'ratzon." The same, we'll understand the difference between the faculties of seichel and ratzon, intelligence and will, desire. Be'inyan. So the Rebbe corrects here and says, "Be'inyan mitziyusam ma'akeches ha'atzmim shalahem." In when we see how they exist and how they emerge from the koiches ha'atzmim, not nefesh, but the koiches atzmim in the nefesh. So it's a step after the nefesh. Now, the Rebbe, you see in the footnote, he says, "Kinidu hutas hamaitik," because what does mitzias mean? Doesn't make sense. Being mitzias ma'akeches. So the Rebbe adds the word mitziyusam. In Ayin Beis, actually, this is actually a word for word from Ayin Beis. And for whatever reason, I'm not sure why, the Rebbe who had Ayin Beis when this was published, I believe, maybe he didn't. That may be, now I just realized. When this was published, no, the Rebbe had Ayin Beis. This was published in Tafshin Yud Aleph, 1951, 70 years ago, actually. And yet the Rebbe does not refer to Ayin Beis throughout, even though it's literally word for word from Ayin Beis. I don't know the reason for that. There must be a reason. You can't say that the Rebbe did not know that what it says in Ayin Beis, because the Rebbe made an index on Ayin Beis and said Maimorim that year and other years from Ayin Beis. But for some reason, he doesn't refer to it. In Ayin Beis, the actual line here, it goes like this.
In which page?
On page 118. What do you mean?
No, in Ayin Beis.
Well, we said 1155 through 1157.
But this specific
1156 maybe.
Yes.
Anyway, in Ayin Beis, the language is here, where it says here,
Be'inyan Beis.
The Rebbe calls mitziyusam. In Ayin Beis, it says, Be'inyan mitziyas ha'seichel va'arotzen ma'akeches atzmim.
In which
so
page?
It doesn't change pshat. The pshat that the Rebbe is saying is the same, but if the actual language in Ayin Beis here is Be'inyan mitziyas ha'seichel va'arotzen ma'akeches atzmim. In short, that means Be'inyan mitziyusam. But anyway, regardless, the point is, now we're talking about how these faculties come from the koiches atzmim. That this distinction we just made, seichel and ratzon, is also a distinction that is made of how they emerge from the koiches atzmim, which is one step beneath the actual etzem hanefesh that we were talking about before. So he's now going to explain what this is. And as I said, this is a please, do me one second. Since we're in the middle of the subject, if you don't mind, let me finish it. And if you have any questions or comments, it's just going to be more productive with a lot of people on the call, on the class. Okay? Dihine. Okay. Okay, before I continue, you want to say something? Go ahead. Say it now.
It's not a contradiction between here and
of course
there,
it's not. That's what I just said. I just said that it's not a contradiction. I just wanted to point out the language. It's exactly the same content. One is mitziyusam, one in Ayin Beis just says mitziyus haseichel v'ratzon. It's exactly the same. There's not one change in pshat. That's what I just said. Yeah.
I'm trying to explain that in Ayin Beis it said the lashon mitziyus because the expression is in a different way. That's what
I just said too. Mitziyus haseichel v'ratzon. The Rebbe says mitziyusam, which is just a short way of saying mitziyus haseichel v'ratzon.
Okay. The Frierdiker Rebbe is saying it in a different expression. That's why it fits to say mitziyusam. In Ayin Beis, he's saying mitziyus haseichel v'ratzon. That makes sense.
What you just said is not what I just said.
No, you said that it's a pella that in Ayin Beis.
I didn't say it's a pella. Where did I say it's a pella? I said it's a pella that the Rebbe does not cite Ayin Beis.
Okay.
That's all I said. Throughout all these Maimorim, even though they're direct language of Ayin Beis, I said I'm wondering why the Rebbe doesn't refer to it. I'm not talking about this footnote per se.
Okay.
That's why I said, let me speak, say my thing, then comment. It'll be a lot more productive. Dihine, now it continues. Dihine, now. Then because now, Kol Koyach Gole, this is the Frierdiker Rebbe's addition to the Ayin Beis. Every Koyach Gole, every actual revealed faculty, Bein Pnimi, Bein Makifi, whether it's a Koyach Pnimi, like Seichel. I explained what Koyach Pnimi means. Koyach Pnimi means it's a localized Eir in a Keli. The mind is within the brain. The emotions are within the heart. The power of vision is within the eye. That's a koyach pnimi, a specific energy in a particular keli. A koyach makifi is not a specific energy in any particular keli. It's a all-encompassing rotzen, desire, whatever the desire may be. There's no one place where desire resides, and desire affects everything equally. Whether it's the power, the will to the desire to see, or the desire to use your mind. So that's okay. So he says every koyach goli, whether it's a pnimi or a makifi, yesh helomei shel hakoyach. There's the concealed state of that revealed faculty, and there's also v'ha'atzmi shaloi, and there's also the etzem of that revealed faculty. So in other words, there's three states: the koyach goli, revealed faculty, like when you're using your mind. That's you're actually sitting and exerting yourself with your mind and whatever it is that you're concentrating on. The koyach nelam would mean that you're not actually doing it, but it's potentially right there, just right now, not active. That's the helomi, he says. That's the koyach yesh helomi shel hakoyach. But it's right there. It just doesn't, it's a matter of just a second. It's like the difference between your eyes are open and your eyes are closed. When they're open, it's active koyach goli of riyah. When they're closed, it's koyach nelam because it's not revealed, but all you have to do is open your eyes. And then there's a state of atzmi shalei, the atzmi of the koyach, meaning not that it's concealed and about to be revealed, but it's fundamentally in a place that's like the core potential of that faculty within the soul. And I explained at length when we learned this in Ayin Beis, why we need all these stages. Because the Eibishter, Hashem made it in a way that it should be structured. So you don't just jump from the nefesh to the koyach goli, it goes through stage by stage by stage. Which of course is similar to what I explained, why the Eibishter created Oyer in the first place. And Oyer itself, you have, in the Oyer, you have the Atzmus, you have the Etzema Oyer, you have Ispashtus Oyer, you have Er Nelam, and you have Er Goli. So you have all the levels, generally 3 levels. And we'll be learning much more about these 3 levels later on. It's going to be 3 levels of Bittul of Oyer that we're talking about are going to be Eris and Kalim, Eris beyond Kalim, and Eris beyond, meaning completely removed from the whole Kalim structure. So the same thing is with our, talking on the human level, a koyach gali is the revealed faculty, a koyach nelam is not revealed, but it still relates to the keli, it's just concealed. It's like something that behind the door, it's not open yet, but it could be open any minute. And there's the koyach ha'atzmi ayuli. Now, if you remember, I explained it with an example that, let's say, when you throw a stone. So koyach gali is the active process, the action of actually throwing a stone. Koyach nelam is the power you have to throw it. Now, someone will say, how far can you throw something? 100 feet. A koyach nelam just means you haven't actually thrown it, but you're going to now do so. So it's just like the power to write. You haven't actually written, but you have the power to write. Koyach atzmi yuli is far deeper, and you don't access it, except later we're going to learn soon through exertion. But if you exercise and you condition yourself, you can bring more from the nelam to the gully, and you could even bring, with a proper exertion, even from the helam atzmi into the nelam, into the gili. So there's basically, it actually has practical implications. It's not just 3 levels. It's the different levels of how faculties. So generally speaking, the Nelam always has more than the Goli, and the Atzmi obviously has infinitely more than the Nelam. That's how it works. And it all originates from the Nefesh itself, but the Nefesh is completely poshet, which means seamless and doesn't have faculties in it. So essentially, these are the levels that we're talking about. So what he calls it now, it has every koyach Goli has, repeat again, yesh helame shaleh koyach, va'atzmi shaleh. Has the concealed state and has the core state. The bekeches hanefesh hariyesh behem seder. The faculties of nefesh is an order. There's a hierarchy. There's a seder. There's an organized process of how they emerge. The sidra momata lamaila, and their order and the process or the order that they are from the bottom up goes like this. Hemkeches hagluyim, the revealed faculties. Keches hanalamim, the concealed faculties. The keches ha'atzmim, the core faculties. So the same faculty has three stages. From the bottom up, revealed, concealed, core, essence, essential. I gave the example, Chassidus gives sometimes the example of two, God forbid, two people who are blind, and yet they give birth to a child that can see. So, what does that mean? We're not talking about. Let's say it's even a fundamental blindness, not an accident, God forbid. So why is the child see? Because the koyach hariyah is intact in the nefesh, even of a blind person. The koyach hariyah. It could be the damages in the eye itself. It could be it's in the optic nerve. It could be maybe even something in the brain, a stroke or whatever it may be. Okay, I don't want to say a stroke because that's not a good example here. My point is, just because the koyach goli is not there does not mean there isn't a koyach atzmi. And even a koyach nela may be there. You know, for example, if someone's, God forbid, eye is damaged or injured, it could be the koyach nelam is there. It's just that the keli is not. It's like having electricity without an appliance, or the appliance has been damaged. Doesn't mean there's no electricity. The point I'm saying here is that you see from there that they're koyches, even though they're not expressed. You see the frustration, God forbid again. So on a stroke victim, they want to move their hand. They want to speak. They can't. What's missing? It's not their desire. It's not even the koyches nalomim or atzmim. It's the koyach goli. There's something that's disconnected. It could be the nerves. It could be the communication between the brain and the actual mechanics of it. Not getting down to the medical definition. I'm just trying to explain that a koyach could be intact even though it's not being expressed. There are people, for example, who are very shy in school, and you think because they're always quiet, they have nothing to say. Then you find out they could be the most brilliant student, but he didn't express it. So expression is not always a sign of what's going on behind the scenes. Any effort that a person makes in communication or in expression is drawing from the koyach nelam into the koyach gali, or at times even from the koyach atzmi. But koyach atzmi, for all practical purposes, you have to see that as almost like core essential archetypes of that faculty. And koyach nelam is already some form of manifestation, and koyach gali obviously is a full expression. So he said that's to say that how it works, the koyches hanefesh, again, koyches gluyim, koyches nelomim, and koyches atzmim. That's what he just said now. Now, koyches nelomim, koyches gluyim, koyches atzmim. Anybody want to ask something?
Koyach atzmi seems to be like a yuli at this point with the way you define.
Yeah, he's going to say soon the word yuli. Yes, correct. Okay, yes. In general, it's Atzmi and Hiyuli can go together. Sometimes they're separated, but for all practical purposes here, they come together. Ubekeches ha'atzmim yesh beis dargis. Now, in the core faculty, there's also two levels. Koyches atzmim I think it means megale. Must be megale. The core faculties that reveal. In other words, that from where originates the koiches nalamim hagluyim. In other words, in koich atzmi is going to distinguish between the way it begins to be a source for the concealed and revealed faculties. That's one level. And the second level is the koiches atzmi hanetuyim u'mishroshim be'etzem hanefesh. The core faculties as they are implanted, embedded, enrooted in the etzem hanefesh. So the koyach atzmi, basically, the higher level is the way it's rooted in the etzem hanefesh, and the outer level of the koyach atzmi is the way it's facing and becoming what will ultimately be revealed into the concealed and revealed faculties. It's something like when we learned, if you remember, about Chochmah. There's Chochmah when it faces Keser, and Chochmah when it faces Bina. So when it faces Keser, it's like the student receiving from its teacher. When it faces Bina, it's like a teacher teaching its student. So the Koiches Atzmim themselves, on one hand, they're rooted in the Etzem HaNefesh. That's the way they are basically faculties of the Nefesh. But then there's the way the Koiches Atzmim begin to become and are facing, and are beginning to become and facing the concealed faculty, which will ultimately then come into the revealed faculty. So there's two levels in the Koiches Atzmim. Now, for the record, in Ayin Beis, didn't break this down in this detail, but when you look at Ayin Beis, you see how much this adds to understand what it says in Ayin Beis. So this is an added havana, an understanding, comprehending with the idea that we're talking about now in the Koiches themselves. When we learned in Ayin Beis, I gave this whole overview that included a lot what we're learning right now. So you may have heard this already from me a few classes back. Okay. Now we're going to talk about we have to get to, now that we've established that. So this is true, like he said, about every koyach, Pnimi or Makifi. So what is true? That Seichel has Seichel HaGoli, revealed intelligence is koyach Goli. Koyach HaNelem of Seichel is the way Seichel is in its concealed state, but just a step away from being revealed. Koyach HaAtzmi is the core state of Seichel in the Nefesh, and that itself, there's two levels. The way it's embedded, ingrained, in deeply rooted in the Nefesh, and the way that it's beginning to be a source for, even though we're going to say soon it's not a mocker, but from there originates the Koyach HaSeichel. The same thing with Ratzon. There's Koyach HaRatzon HaGoli, a revealed desire. There's a concealed desire. There's an Atzmi desire, and an Atzmi itself has two levels that we just discussed. What he's going to talk about now is there a difference between how Seichel Goli, revealed intelligence, emerges from its concealed and Atzmi level, and how Ratzon emerges from those levels. That's going to be the discussion now. And of course, the answer is yes, there's going to be a difference. So even though they all have these levels, but there's a difference how Ratzon relates to the Atzmi, and how Seichel relates to the Atzmi. So this is in addition, this is going deeper than what he said earlier, that in general, Ratzon is the inclination and the drawing of the soul to whatever it is that it desires, and Seichel is the actual functionality of a particular faculty called intelligence. So this is taken now further in understanding the whole dynamics of how it ultimately works from those deeper levels to the revealed levels. So that's what we're going to learn now. So he says like this, Hine, now, yesh hevdel vehefresh, there's a difference and a distinction, or a distinction and a difference, or a separate distinction. There were different ways to translate hevdel vehefresh. They both mean difference, but it's a little different. Hevdel is more from separate, and hefresh more from difference. Bein hakoiches seichel v'rotzen b'inyan mitziyusam, interesting. Here he says mitziyusam. That's the way the Rebbe edited it before. Okay, that there's a difference between the faculties of seichel and ratzon in their existence and how they emerge from their core faculties. So even though they both have these actually 4 levels, 2 atzmi, nelem and gole, there's a difference how the seichel, the mitzias of seichel comes from its atzmi, and how rotzen comes from its atzmi. That's what he's going to discuss now. What is this difference? For who? And what is the difference? And the difference is shekayach haseichel ba b'derech nivdal. Kayach haseichel, the power of intelligence, as it emerges and from its original place in the core archetypal faculty in the soul, is b'derech nivdal, like something that is removed. Nivdal means not a direct flow. It's like a leap. B'derech nivdal. So if you, let's say, saw a flow going from a pitcher of water flowing into a cup, that's not nivdal. Nivdal would mean if there's something that separates and something like an obstacle or some impediment that channels it in a different way. So that's a certain type of a leap or a separation. We'll soon understand what that means. The koyach harotzen hu b'derech hisachdus. The koyach harotzen, the opposite of nivdal, is hisachdus. Koyach harotzen emerges in a way that's connected or united with the koyach atzmi. The hina yedua, because it's now known, shekol hasichlim, all matters of intelligence, all ideas. Hari yesh moker v'sherish ma'ayin heimon nimshachim u'mizgalim. All ideas, when we conceive of ideas, whatever idea may be, they don't come from nowhere. They come from somewhere from where they are drawn and are revealed. And here too, and as we said before, and there's a very set order and process in the manner that they are transmitted and revealed. So when ideas come into our mind, number one, it's coming from somewhere, and there's a systematic process, a system, an organized process, a systematic process, maybe better than we're organized, of how they are drawn and revealed into our conscious minds. Asher b'chlolus, which in general, heim beis drachim sheinin b'inyan isgalus haseichel. In general, there are 2 ways of how seichel gets revealed. Now you see again, the Rebbe Friedrich Rebbe is adding very important lines that really help understand Ayin Beis much better. If you read Ayin Beis alone without these additional lines, you'll see it's much harder to figure out. We figured it out because firstly we looked here, but also you could figure it out. But here it's much more spelled out. So he's now going to explain 2 ways seichel comes. One is going to be yosher and chezer, if you remember. So he's going to explain that now. Okay, so what does he say? This process, this systematic process or system of how seichel emerges from its source is 2 ways in general. The revelation of intelligence in a direct way. Yosher means direct light, straight. And a revelation that comes, a refracted light, something that comes out like a bounce back. The classic difference between Yosher and Chezer is like the sunlight and moonlight. They're both light, but one comes directly from a source shining outward. The other is refracting or reflecting. We're going to now understand these 2 levels of seichel, which is going to be the ideas you conceive of on your own, and ideas that come through some type of bounce back from a student, from a question, from a challenge, as we're going to learn now. So it's 2 different ways how seichel emerges from its sheirush, what he called from the ayin, moker v'sheirush ma'ayin, from the place, the root and source, or the source and root from which they originate. 2 different ways. Okay. Dehine, because now Sheda Sharishan Shakol his Chakmus V'Seichel, the first root of all his Chakmus V'Seichel, all innovation and intelligence. Hu Mekeach HaSeichel HaHiyuli HaAtzmi HaNatua Umushrish Be'etzem HaNefesh. He's now introducing the word Hayuli. Not sure why he didn't say it earlier, but clearly he's talking about that, seemingly that level. Comes from the Keich HaSeichel HaYuli, the potential and core intelligence that is embedded or rooted or embedded, ingrained. Be'etzem HaNefesh, in the core soul. Remember that highest level we spoke about. Koyach Atzmi. That's Natura, the higher level of the Koyach Atzmi. Okay, that's the first root of all innovation or ideas and Seichel. The Gilui HaSeichel, page 119 now. And the revealing of Seichel, revelation of Seichel, it's interesting, he's distinguishing Sheda Sharishan. The first root is the Hiyuli. But that's the first root in the root of it all, which is in the Atzmi. Gili HaSeichel, the lowest level, which means the revelation of intelligence, Bo Mekoyach HaMaskil, Shenikra Mazel Machkim. It comes from the power of intelligence, which is called Mazel Machkim. Mazel is like an energy, is a form, that Machkim that allows you, that causes a person to have intelligence. Like everything has a Mazel Lamailo. A Mazel here means in the Nefesh, there's a level called Mazel Machkim. Koyach HaMaskil, the power to conceive of ideas. So right now we've described all three levels. The Sheder Shrishan is Koyach HaHiyuli HaAtzmi, that's rooted in the soul. Koyach HaMaskil is the power to conceive, that's the Nelam. And the Seichel Goli is the revealed Seichel. I don't know if he says it, but in Ayin Beis, he said that the Koyach HaMaskil is called Hemshech Nelama. Helam, not Atzmi. Does he say it here? Yeah, he probably will say it. Let's see.
He's saying it here now.
Now that we know that there's three levels, he's now going to explain, and I'll just give a preface because we learned this in Ayin Beis already, that the Yashar is Koyach HaMaskil, the Helam to the Gili. Koyach Nelamim to Koyach Nelam, Koyach Seichel, concealed to revealed. And Chezer goes deeper into the Koyach Atzmi Hiyuli to draw from there. That's going to be the difference now of how Seichel, the two ways that Seichel ideas come from their source. Ubezehu ahefesh b'shnei darkei haskola v'yischachmus. B'kol dvar Seichel v'chachma shetiyah. And this is the difference between the two methods, darkei, or ways of conceiving and innovating in every dvar seichel, every idea, the chokhmah and wisdom, shatiyah, no matter what. Whatever idea it may be, the two ways will be understood by these two levels that we just described. So every idea possible falls into one of the two categories, yashar or chezer. The haderech, the yashar, the Rosh Tevis is yashar. The method or the way, the path, if you wish, of yashar, of let's call it direct light. Hine amshachas haseichel hu mekeach hamaskel shebenefesh. The amshachas haseichel, the extension, the expression, the drawing of intelligence is from the koyach hamaskel shebenefesh, from the koyach hamaskel we just mentioned, the power to conceive, which is a koyach nelam. The koyach hamaskil hu gili min hanefesh shenimshach liyas mokel l'seichel. The koyach hamaskil, even though it's still not revealed intelligence, but compared to the etzem hanefesh, it's a gili. Then now you have something that's become a mokel l'seichel. It's become a defined source for where intelligence will come from. As we said, the atzmi is rooted in the soul. The koyach goli is the actual faculty at work. In between is this koyach nelim, the koyach hamaskil, which is already so-called outside of the soul, because it's already become a source for seichel, but it's a source. So it's like an interface between the atzmi and the goli, between the core and the revealed. The koyach hamaskil who gili min hanefesh shenimshach liyas mokel l'seichel. Right. The koyach zeh ein seichel adayin. This koyach hamaskil is not yet actual intelligence. It's a source for intelligence, but it's not actual intelligence. Ki'im gili min hanefesh hu b'chinas hamshacha nelama. Okay, he says it right here. Yes, it's a gili from the nefesh, which means it's already some form of it's no longer just embedded in the nefesh. It's now some type of source, which is called, is a level of hamshacha nelama. It means there's a hamshacha, but it's concealed. So to use the example I used earlier with a vision, you have vision, the power of vision in your eye. When your eyes are open, you see. But let's say, for argument's sake, your eyes are closed, you're asleep, or you closed your eye. There's the power of vision in your eye right then as well. But it's nelama. What does it mean it's nelama? It's not revealed. So essentially, it's the power of vision. You can't say it's the vision in the soul because it's in your eye. It's already there. And in a split second, you open your eye, you see. So it's not a faculty. You can't say it's a revealed, tangible faculty, but you also can't say that it's an atzmi in the nefesh. It's a faculty that's in a state of concealment until you use it. So it's a helam. Now, it's not a perfect example because the vision in your eye before you open is not like the koyach hamaskil. The koyach hamaskil is not just an intelligence that's about to be revealed. Koyach hamaskil is a power, but the koyach hamaskil is like a mayon, is like a sense of like a wellspring that has the capacity to generate ideas. Think of it like a generator. It's a generator of ideas. Ideas have not yet emerged from it, but it is a generator. Higher than the koyach hamaskil, you can't call a generator of ideas. You could just say in the nefesh is rooted the power of koyach haseichel hayuli ha'atzmi shel haseichel, but you can't call it a generator of ideas. Koyach hamaskil is the actual generator of ideas, and that will from there will come actual revealed and conscious ideas. Okay.
You said
Please, if you don't mind, let me just finish this because let's learn this in a smooth way, and then we'll be able to just go over anything you want to go over. Please, just bear with me. Because it's a generator. It's not actual intelligence. It's revealed from the nefesh. That means something is now has the capacity to generate ideas, but it's a state of hamshacha nelama, a concealed hamshacha. So it's a transmission, but it's concealed. So you can't say it's not hamshacha, but you can't say it's goli revealed either. This means it already extended from the nefesh, from the soul, liyas mokel l'seichel, to become a source for intelligence, sheyove begili, that it can come to a revealed state, but it's not yet in that revealed state. So now it's come into a state that is going to become, that can come into gili, but practically it's still in a state of concealment. But from this koyach hamaskil, it's all still yasher. From this koyach hamaskil nimshachim kol hagiluyim deseichel v'schakmus bedvar ma. From this extends all the revelations of intelligence and conception and innovation, whatever matter that you innovate in the yasher manner. That's why it's called mazel machkim. The mazel hu ashpa nelemes umachkim hu poel dover. She's explaining now the word mazel machkim. Mazel means hashpon elemis. It's already when you say your mazel, like you say, for example, in Daniel, it says that they trembled in the presence, and it says, what did they see? It says they didn't see mazlayu chazi. What does that mean? That sometimes you don't feel it, but something your mazel feels it. It means there's something in your subconscious, if you wish, or superconscious that senses something that is not yet revealed to you, but it has an effect. So it's a type of mazel is like the root of something. In this case, like the koyach hamaskil is like the mazel. And then why is it called machkim? Machkim u'poel dover. Because it's a poel dover of what this mazel is affecting is to be machkim, is to conceive of ideas. So mazel machkim is another name for koyach hamaskil, basically. The zeu inyone de koyach hamaskil. This is the inyan of the power to conceive. She'enu seichel adayin. It's not yet seichel, actual conscious active seichel. Aval imze harikola giluim sichlim nimtzoyim memenu dafka. So even though it's not actual seichel, all the revealed seichel, all the revealed intelligence emerge from this level of koyach hamaskil or koyach machkim, mazel machkim. Okay. I'm going to read till the end of the paragraph. You want to say something? Anything right now? I
just want to understand about, you said the Mayan is a generator. The Mayan, I think is already something. The koyach hamaskil is einoi seichel adayin.
So you know what? Forget about the word Mayan. He doesn't use Mayan. Let's not use Mayan. Let's call it narrator. Okay. Okay, now he's going to go to the second type, the second manner. Remember, he said Shnei Drachim, two paths.
Mazle chazi, that would be machkim. I can understand it's a hashpah.
No, it's just an example. What mazle chazi is not machkim. Mazle chazi just, I came to explain what mazel means. Mazel means a force that's concealed but has impact.
But he's also using the word mazel machkim. It's miloshin.
We also say mazel tov, and we say mazel madim. We have many mazal. Each one has a mazel. Mazel is used in many different places. The word mazel, he's saying, is a Hemshech elama. It's a root of something that's concealed. In this case, it's mazel machkim. There's mazel that leads to chesed.
No, I'm asking, it's machkim miloshin chochma. It's a chochma here.
Machkim, yeah. The mazel machkim is the Hemshech elama, meaning the generator of ideas, koyach hamaskil, that the mazel for machkim, the mazel to bring intelligence. Machkim from the word chochma, yes. Okay. So right now we've discussed Yashar is the relationship between the koyach gole, the revealed intelligence, and its concealed source, koyach hamaskil. What about the third level, koyach atzmi, hiyuli? So he says the koyach haseichel hiyuli atzmi, the power of intelligence, the potential and core intelligence, which is natua, which is implanted and rooted in etzem hanefesh, ein b'chinas hamshacha klal. That's not even hamshach at all. Not even hamshach in the lama. You can't call it a mazel. You can't call it that something is drawn down or drawn out. It's not hamshach at all. The ein beged the mocker l'seichel goli. And it's not even in the domain, in the realm of being a source for revealed intelligence. Level 2, koyach hanelam, hamshach hanelama, and koyach hamaskil is already out, so-called from the soul. It's something was drawn, but it's in a concealed state, like a generator. Now we're talking about a level that's not even in that place. Omnam, nevertheless, b'derech hasheni, shu b'derech er chezer, in the second method of acquiring intelligence, which is the derech of Erchezer, the refracted light. One reaches into the power of potential and core seichel ha'atzmi in the nefesh itself. That's not even hamshacha. V'hainu hamshacha v'izgalos ha'seichel b'derech er yosher u'mekayach ha'maskil. So what he's concluding now, which means the hamshacha, the drawing and revelation of intelligence in a direct light, that comes from the kayach ha'maskil, level 2. V'izgalos the seichel b'derech er chezer u'mekayach ha'seichel ha'yuli ha'atzmi. And the revelation of intelligence that comes from a refracted light, which he didn't yet explain what that means. Questions and student, well, we'll learn that soon, next class. That comes from the power of seichel, the potential and coarse power of seichel rooted in the soul itself. That's not even a hamshach. So this is obviously Ayin Beis, but you see he's elaborated more and given us a little more context, understanding the two methods. In the next chapter, he's going to discuss what is the difference between Yosher and Chezer and Seichel. And then he's going to go to Ratzon, which is where we're really leading to. As I said, a lot of this is the Frierdiker Rebbe's additions. So, good. We conclude with chapter 26 on page 119, which is corresponding more or less with page 1156 in Ayin Beis. And we'll continue learning this till page 121. And then we go back to Ayin Beis, I believe. One second, maybe not. One second. Yeah. This will conclude the first level of Bittul. So we're still in the middle now, and all this is coming to explain how Oyer, even though it's infinitely distant from its source, or from the etzem, but at the same time, its role is to reflect. It's not b'derech richuk. And he's giving Ratzon as an example. But before that, he's going to hold a discussion of seichel before we get to Ratzon, and I believe we'll also understand more of why he's giving this whole elaboration to understand that whole picture. We talked about it some, but we'll talk about it some more. Does anybody want to ask anything before we conclude?
In Oyer Yosho, the koyach hamaskil is a mocker to koyach hagolui, because he said, "Hare kol hagiluyim sichliim nimtzoim mimenu davke." Nimtzoim means that this is a mocker, or
absolutely, he calls it a mocker l'seichel. Yeah. Koyach hayuli atzmi is not a mocker. You can't call it a source because it's not even a generator yet. And koyach hamaskil is a mocker. And the way you reach Koyach, the Oyer Yosher is the Koyach HaMaskil flowing into the Koyach HaGolei, Seichel Golei. And Erchezer reaches the place that's beyond being a Mok. He says clearly, it's Mok l'Seichel, a few places. He says, Lias Mok l'Seichel, Sheyavi Begili, line 6. And Koyach Yuli Atzmi says, Eina Mok l'Seichel. Eina Begeda Mok l'Seichel. That's the distinction. Well, this is not technical. Just think about the idea. One is the nefesh that carries the koyach atzmi as it's rooted in the nefesh. It's just a faculty of the nefesh at that point, nothing else. Koyach hamaskil is already an active force. However, it's concealed still. It's like I said, a generator of intelligence. Like he said, it's all be'efa mesuder. It's step by step how things go from the nefesh into expression, further expression, all the way to a revealed state. Basically, 3 states. He said 4 really, because Atzmi has 2 levels itself, but basically 3 levels here.
But the koyach hamaskil is not a direct mocker. Mimenu nimtzoim, right?
He says it's a mocker l'seichel. Why is it not direct?
No, because he's saying that in koyach hamaskil is kol hagiluyim sichliim nimtzoim mimenu davke.
But he says it's a mocker. He doesn't say not direct. He says it's a mocker. A mocker is a mocker. It's a generator of intelligence. I don't know what you mean by mocker then. What's not a mocker is koyach yuli atzmi is not a mocker.
Chegou para você? Não, yeah.
Maybe somebody can just mute themselves so we don't have to hear. Okay, so let's conclude here.